Hi, and welcome to Brohoyo Podcast, the podcast about gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey everyone.
And this week, we're going to be discussing patch 3.3's story, the events that went on, our thoughts on it, and maybe some speculation on where the story could be going. But I guess let's jump right in. If you don't mind, Dave, I'll actually start, if that's okay with you.
Well, sure, with just the one quick disclaimer, if it wasn't obvious, spoilers here moving forward. So if you've not completed the 3.3 Trailblazer quest and want to go through that spoiler-free, please stop now, come back and see us once you finish that. But moving forward from here, there will be spoilers, so you have been warned.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Jumping right into the 3.3 storyline. Overall, I have to say I was very whelmed by the story. I wasn't overwhelmed. I wasn't underwhelmed. It was okay for what it was. I think part of it was it didn't really, to be honest, it was sort of a flat circle. I don't think that it did much that I wasn't already expecting it to do. There weren't any crazy twists or turns that I was going like, oh, I'm completely shocked. Most of what happened was foreshadowed and fairly straightforward. I could actually follow what the story was this time. Again, probably because it was a bit more rote by the numbers. Didn't get lost as much in the jargon as some of the other ones have. I do have to say my complaint about last time of I'm tired of sad still kind of holds, but I've accepted that just unfortunately the story of Amphoreus is supposed to be a tragedy or something similar, or at least it's supposed to be set up as something kind of dark and more tragic, even if I don't personally believe that's what it's going to end on. That's the note that it's going to end on. But yeah, that's sort of my thoughts, at least off the top of my head. Dave, you have any sort of general ideas or thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, so the initial impressions of the patch, I feel like you were whelmed. That's good, clever. I guess I would probably share a similar you know explanation for it. I guess in terms of my take on it, I enjoyed the introduction. Well, not necessarily the introduction. I guess the reintroduction to the character of Cypher and a little bit about her backstory. Being a character I was interested in pulling for, to learn a bit more about her backstory was nice, but in terms of the actual events that are going on and how they're affecting the Trailblazer and everything that goes with that, it felt like we got a lot of retelling of a history lesson that we've kind of already received through other characters' eyes, and then we are asked to be, emotionally attached to some NPCs that outside of this particular arc of the story aren't really going to have any major effect, I would imagine, moving forward. Now, part of that is me speculating, right? And that, and I could be completely wrong on that, in which case I blew off these characters. Boy, won't I look foolish on this episode. And that's fine. We can revisit when those stories come out. But as far as the story itself, like you said, it kind of fell flat for me. In terms of the events, a lot of predictable stuff. We knew where it was going. It's been building up to this conflict, and so yeah, just pretty meh. I will say that the trend continued from this last patch, and again here that I did enjoy. One of my shining lights that I enjoy is anytime the Herda shows up is a win for me. She cracks me up with just her dialogue and just her matter-of-fact tone, and this her interactions with Squirrellum there at the end, and them discussing things and the events ongoing. That was a win for me. That was, but to play through the whole story arc campaign here, and for that to be the moment when it's supposed to kind of really be setting up probably the next story plot. Just kind of tells you how little the needle moved for me on this particular patch, story-wise.
Well, how about we really quickly hit on some various moments in the plot, and then we'll move to what I think is actually the stronger portion of the story, which is the characters. Because I really do think that Hyacinth and Cypher were the high points of the patch. But before we jump into them, at least as far as the plot goes, functionally the first half of the story is Hyacinth has to go and get the Sky Titan's core flame. Like I said, it's very okay as far as the story goes. About basically you had two groups of sky people, one that was for the sun, one that was for the rain. The sun was the favored one and was burning out humanity, and so they had to be taken out. And it turns out that no, the hero that everyone thought, fought the god was, turned out she was humanist all along. Human, I guess human. That's actually not the term. I think I want to use racist, but for humans, speciest, whatever, against humans all along. And
xenophobic.
I don't know, because she was human as well. It's weird.
She's a self-hating Zionist, xenophobist.
Yeah, a Zionist is very different.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Whatever, doesn't really matter because you basically fight her. I will say that boss fight I actually really enjoyed. It didn't pop off quite as much as the it's not Coachella. What is her name from Yavin?
So you're not talking about the Cocolia fight. You're talking about
I think I am talking about the first real boss fight that you get to when you play the game, where the music just pops off.
That's the Cocolia fight. I thought you were for a second there talking about the I think the third fight with the. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You're talking about Cocolia.
Yeah. You're good. I don't think it goes quite as hard as the Cocolia one. I think it's just because the way the music was timed in that one was perfect. Whereas in this fight, while I actually did like the music and the way it played, it didn't have those. It wasn't timed and plotted quite as well as that fight, but it hit a lot of the notes. I couldn't see myself listening to that soundtrack outside of Star Rail. It's just that unfortunately it didn't have quite those big banger moments that the Cocolia fight had. And that one just set an unfair bar in some ways. But,
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the actual boss fight and the music, because I felt similarly in terms of the boss fight itself being really well done. And this also includes like the cutscenes. Well, the story may have been, whelming, but the cutscenes they do a really good job with cutscenes and the action and capturing all of that in that. So I will give credit there where it's due from a cinematography standpoint. The music, the music for this boss fight was pretty strong. The Cocolia boss fight, I think I can maybe unbiasedly be it's on par with that in that it's really, really strong. But the fact that the Cocolia boss fight was that first boss fight, our first real endeavor in Star Rail, it holds that special place in our heart, so we maybe see it through slightly rose-tinted glasses, just a hair perhaps to elevate it a little higher than this one. But this one was still good nonetheless. And I said, so I ultimately agree with that. The characters, Hyacinth and Cypher, both, like I mentioned, getting a little bit of Cypher's backstory and seeing how that played out. I did enjoy that aspect. The characters themselves, the playable characters, not the NPCs, but the playable characters themselves, those aspects of the stories are usually pretty strong and pretty good. I mean, they have to, because they want to try and entice you to ultimately pull for the character, right? That's the secret part that we're saying out loud here. But they do legitimately do a good job, I think, showing with the character's anguish with the loss of Aya and just all the destruction and everything that's occurring, even if it's a gimmicky trope of how the story events are unfolding, the characters and their reactions to them still feel very well done and appropriate for each of their personalities.
Yeah, and I'm really quickly go on a bunny trail here.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest. Aglaya dying was definitely a twist that I both saw, because they've already admitted that only one character is but the way that they try to portray it, I get where they were going for. I think my biggest problem, and I don't blame the voice actors for this, I think it was a direction issue. is that especially Finon, after a certain point, I really got tired of his I am trying to convey like stress and sadness voice that he had, where I don't think he was doing a bad job. I just think from the direction that he was given, it was constant. And after a certain point, I'm like, look, buddy, I get that you're in a high stress scenario, but you're also acting against like Hyacinth, who is just straight toned, and all the other characters are straight toned, and he's the only character in certain scenes. It also doesn't help that Don Hung is completely unvoiced still.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well, as for part of the reason of my disconnect from some of these events and stories is the silence of Don Hung in more of these tense moments is just, it pulls you out of any immersion that you were feeling at the time. It just completely brings you back. Like, then your mind goes to, the voice actor drama and all the strikes and everything going on there, and it just ruins that immersion.
Yeah. And so, the fact that basically Finon is the only one that's doing it for a number of scenes, and again, that's not his fault. There's extenuating circumstances around it. I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't think the voice actor did a bad job. It's just, it creates this feeling of like, okay, Finon, I get it, but at the same time, like, you can't go from calling, okay, partner, let's do this, to like, why are you depressed all the time? Like, this is not depressed time, buddy. This is, we're punching a phoenix to death time. Like, fit the mood, buddy. Like, you're bringing us down. Don't bring us down, Bruce. ELO reference for those who get it. But
if you know, you know.
If you know, you know. But yeah, there was that. I also think Cypher was somewhat inconsistent voice acting wise, which again, I don't blame the actress. I firmly believe that that's a directorial issue, where it seemed like scene to scene she would rapidly switch between, like cat burglar, no pun intended, to like depressed sad person because of the death of Aglaia, who she was close with, and then like an almost Harley Quinn-esque like character.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, with her interactions with the Flame Reaver.
Yeah, with her interactions with the Flame Reaver, and so there was just this rapid back-to-back switching, and it made the character come off as inconsistent, which I don't think was the intent, but it just didn't quite work, at least for me. And again, I don't think that the actress did a bad job. I think she was doing what she was told to do to the best of her abilities. It was just, I think, on the direction side, they didn't do a good job of selling those changes in tone, especially through the character models, because the best example I can come up with is there's a scene where she's supposed to be running from the Flame Reaver, and the character model can't express exhaustion, so the voice actress is having to convey all of that herself, but it's on a character model that just looks the same as normal. So there's nothing there to work with. It just sounds discordant, at least to me it did. And again, I don't want to rag on him too much. Overall, I did like the character. I liked Cypher quite a bit, but I'm also biased. I really like trickster characters and sneaky, haha, an illusionist, I pulled one over your eyes, haha, type characters. Like, those are fun for me. So her being that archetype predisposes me to kind of being on her side. But yeah, sorry, didn't mean to go on such a long bunny trail.
Oh, you're good. No, I was with you the whole time. I was with you that whole time there. Some bunny trails, maybe I'll hop off midway through and you keep on going, but I was with you on that one. So that I agree with the sentiments on that a lot. Like I mentioned, the Don Hung thing being silenced still is disjarring from the immersion of the moment. Cypher, I was thinking back to the time that you referenced there in terms of trying to get exhaustion across via purely vocal expression with no visual cues whatsoever, and it kind of a miss on what actually is really a really complex and interesting character. And then with the big twist being, the little purple blobby that is one of the more annoying game mechanics that I talked about in the previous episode they introduced. He ends up being like the ace in the hole for the whole gimmick. And then with Hyacinth, or Cotton Candy, Barbara,
Yeah.
essentially. She gives off those same vibes, just, Star Rail universe and outer space instead of, magic and, high fantasy in Genshin. So, now as far as getting the conclusion of where they left it, because they did kind of leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger a little bit in terms of how we're going to resolve this, and I would imagine this, is going to segue into the next patch where we're talking about maybe Finon is probably going to be a pullable character at some point in the patch cycle while they resolve it. And then they also alluded to Black Swan and then March 7th. I think I could have swore they mentioned something about March 7th being on the planet. I was like,
Yeah.
on the planet. She's on Astral Express, isn't she? She's in her room.
So yeah, that's one where we're now going to get into crack theory territory, or I guess technically we're getting into wild speculation. Let's phrase it that way. We're going to get into wild speculation here, as far as like stuff going forward. I really do think that, at least based off of what they have alluded to so far, it seems like all of the characters, and I don't want to be too down on this story, but I think that most of the character sacrifices up to this point are explicitly meant to be temporary. Like, they've already been saying, like, oh, on the other side of the West Wind, the world will be reborn, etc., etc. All these characters are going to come back. Like, that seems to be where all of this is going. That it's just, can you get to the other side of, Finon is the new Atlas who is carrying the world. Everybody gets to come back. All of these characters who supposedly passed away are now reusable again. I don't think they're going to pull a Misha for an entire planet, where it's like, no, everybody's dead. You can still use the character, but congratulations, all these characters are dead. That's the... At this point, I wouldn't say that is the ass pool that they are doing. Like, they very clearly set that up as the standard. But it does appear, and again, we're getting into pure speculation, but based on the framing that they used for, I believe the character's name was Cyrene.
Green, yeah, at the very end.
At the very end. I think that is in some way, shape, or form March 7th, or her proxy on it. Because she's resonating with the remembrance on the planet, if I remember correctly. Like, that was the whole thing, is that she's in her phase 3 ice, because she's resonating with the remembrance on that planet. And so I think Cyrene is the manifestation of that. Again, I have nothing that can prove it, other than the fact that I'm 90% certain that Cyrene follows or uses a majority of March 7th's model, like her face and so forth, and there's probably like a hair swap or something. At least based off of the short glimpse that I got of her. I am also going to very quickly, because I know that they've been doing a lot of Greek lore and Greek mythology references, and apparently Cyrene was a Thessalian princess and huntress known for her skill in wrestling and her role as the namesake of the ancient city of Cyrene in North Africa. So, yeah, apparently she was abducted by Apollo and taken to Libya. I have no idea how that's going to have anything to do.
Yeah, could you tie that in to Star Rail? What's the thread here?
Full disclosure, I was really just Googling it to see if there was something. I'm not seeing it my own self. Maybe this Cyrene's going to have a wrestling theme. I don't know. That would be kind of funny, seeing March 7th suplex some people. I don't know. They might just be pulling the name and calling it a day. Apparently, she was also the daughter of a nymph. Maybe that has something to do something. I don't think there's necessarily a one-to-one on this one.
Our only introduction with Cyrene was very brief. It was, I think, a flashback scene with Finon. Referring to him as the deliverer in the prophecy.
Yeah, it was when he was at the very end, about to put the core flame in and basically finish everything up. You had the Intellitron that was there. That was basically I'm basically the Watcher who has to see all of this go down.
Yeah, he seems like he's up to something nefarious, even though he's troll. That's fine.
So we know that there's the Emperor's Scepter that is at the core of this, and if I remember my Star Rail lore correctly, the emperor that they're probably referring to is, I think, Emperor Rupert, which was the robot emperor that caused the rebellion a while back. It's all in the simulated universe. I've seen a lot of it, but I didn't necessarily internalize all of the lore there. But I believe it's probably a reference to the Intellitron Emperor, who basically took over the universe, and it's one of his scepters. So I'm willing to bet that he's associated in some way to that. Like either is its proxy or representation on the world, or somehow it's tied to that. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, he was there, was about to basically complete the cycle, and then Cyrene shows up and goes, hey, we're going to turn this into a romance. And I'm left going, I don't know if they mean romance in the like modern sense of the word, where it's a like love story, or if they mean romance in the classical sense of the word, where it's more of an adventure story. I don't know, because the translation could be doing either way.
Yeah, it's fair. It could go either way.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
And just speculation on my part, I think they're meaning more of the adventure one, just because you can't introduce a female character and then have her in a potential romance with a story that isn't used. That's just the way gotchas work. I wish it wasn't, but I highly doubt that's the direction they're going to take that character.
So then that puts us with essentially the next bit would be, so we get Cypher on the next patch. And then, what you think we go straight into the next story arc, or the next part of the story, or you think we get some interlude filler?
So I'm willing to bet we are going to get the final. So we have Cypher for the remainder of this patch. The next story bit is going to be wrapping the story up. We're going to get final. I believe that they've already posted up. We're getting final as the next character. We also then have the Fate Stay collab. So what I'm expecting is going to happen is the first half of the patch is going to be them basically wrapping up the story. We're then going to get Fate Stay, and then because, again, this is a speculation, these are not story spoilers, I don't know, I'm just guessing. But because the entire setup here is that everybody's going to get reborn in the new world, after they reset it or bring everybody back to life or whatever it is that they do in this mini, again, full speculation here, mini simulated universe, basically. Whenever they get everybody back, that then means that when they do the next patch, they'll be able to introduce characters like Byrene. I believe there's also a character that they've mentioned a couple times who has passed away. And I do not remember the character's name, but they've mentioned before. Sorry?
I was going to say, is this how Genshin players get Senora back? We just get her back in Honkai Star Rail?
Maybe. I don't know. But there was a character that they've mentioned throughout the story, especially when you're going through the Land of the Dead. They're like, oh yeah, this one Christos heir had passed away or had already died. And they're all like, oh, if only she had been here. She was so amazing. She was great. I think she was a musician of some sort. Oh, she was great. And so they've already dropped that name. I'm willing to bet that once we're on the other side and everybody's come back, they'll basically drop that character as well. So you'll be able to pull a character who's technically already dead in the current timeline, but in the future they'll be brought back because of shenaniganery. That's my guess. That's shooting from the hip. No, these are not deep spoilers. This is speculation and pure guesswork based off of what I've seen in the story and what they've foreshadowed so far. Which again, most of this patch, there wasn't anything that wasn't heavily foreshadowed already. There weren't any. All of the twists were well, spotlighted enough that it didn't really hit me from left field in any of them.
Yeah, it was, it moved the narrative along, right? It moved the story along. It felt like at times there were extended breaks in the action. It almost felt like at points we were just more like reading a graphic novel with some of the cutscenes being a long time or something. And by cutscenes, I mean the dialogue, not physical actual cutscenes. There were a couple of those, but those weren't long. But I'm talking about dialogue more so than I guess full-on cutscenes, just to be clear.
Yeah, and not to speak over you, but I tend to leave it on auto and have it just play through any of the spoken scenes. And I know for a fact there were a couple that I started the scene and it was 20 minutes to 25 minutes before I was back to actually doing anything, like any actual game. Now, part of that is probably because I kept on allowing Hyacinth to speak instead of taking the, hey, just summarize it option. But I didn't want to choose that because I didn't know if it would be, like, if it dumped me out and then I'd have to click back in, or if there was something important, I didn't want to miss it. So,
Well, I think about it from a gamer convenience spectacle, right? Because if you have these long extended dialogues, these long extended cutscene type stuffs with no breaks in between them, from experience, say you lose your internet connection or something like that, and it does a quick blip or a reset, and you get logged out of the server, you have to log back in. You're not picking up mid dialogue. You got to start that all over from the beginning, and because it's Hoyoverse, there is no skip button.
Yep.
You are sitting through 20 minutes of dialogue again.
Yeah.
But I would like to see, even if it's just a quick blip of a break, just so that you can have a quote unquote save spot. So God forbid you do lose internet connection, or there's some time your computer crashes, or your phone battery dies, or something, that you're not having to then restart over this long dialogue for 30 minutes before you're moving to the next quest area or you're doing the next battle. Something like that, a fail-safe essentially, to be put in place would be kind of nice to see. Because I have experienced that in the past. It was a couple of years ago before I changed internet providers. Won't get into that story or mention who I was with or who I am with currently. It's not why I'm here.
Yeah.
Just say that it was annoying, and I'm just looking out for so that happens to nobody else, because it's annoying.
Yeah, and again, Honkai Star Rail is not Metal Gear Solid. We're not signing on for hour-plus long cutscenes that ramble on about whatever. Hideo Kojima can get away with that. I don't think Hoyoverse can. Not yet.
And that's the thing too, right? It's the story itself isn't going to be grabbing. There was a discussion that I was, watching, as far as like, where are all the good characters? Where are all the writing for good characters instead of these like surface level characters that we're seeing in a bunch of video games that are out there? And it's almost like you actually have complex and well written characters in some of these gacha games. It's just missed because we skip through the story sometimes. And so, again, I'm not advocating for skipping through the story, right? Because some of these characters are really well done. I think there was some truth to that sentiment, in that some of these characters are really well done and complex. So I do still want to watch the cutscenes. All I'm saying is just give me a small pause in between.
Yeah.
So I can just take a breather, or maybe I just wanted to advance the story a little bit, and then I can, after maybe 5 to 10 minutes of dialogue, I can go do my dailies or whatever it is, or whatever have you. But anyway, so it's just a quick tie in there to the quality of characters, and because again, we talked about Hyacinth, we talked about Cypher, both being really well written characters, and they're complex, and a lot of those we see flashes of these different things that they're feeling and going through, and kind of how they're growing and evolving. But if you're not really paying attention to the story, or it's not resonating with you, you can miss on some of these subtleties. Because I know, like, I probably missed on a few with Mighty back during that story arc, because he's just not a character that was resonating with me. So I was maybe glossing over whenever he was going through his edgy, angsty phase.
And Hyacinth.
So I was just saying, so I don't know if you share those thoughts, or if you have any pushback or agreement on that sentiment versus what we're seeing in maybe AAA games, or just the gaming industry in general.
I mean, I think it's obviously going to vary depending on what the genre is. RPGs in general, I have a higher expectation of character. I expect characters to be much better developed and have more depth in an RPG than I would in, say, a arena shooter or something like that. Like those, it's going to vary by genre, and even within that genre, you mentioned that My Day didn't really resonate with you. And I'll be honest, he was okay for me. The problem was that he was very stock, and Hyacinth was one that I was going into kind of going, I pulled for her more for mechanics than because I actually liked the character, because she is very bubbly and sweet, and for some reason her unicorn, elkhorn, flying horse thing makes bird noises that confused me. Not gonna lie, one of the first notes I had is why is Legolas making bird noises? I don't know why it duded. It doesn't make sense. Horses don't. But regardless, she came across as very sugary and bland in a lot of ways. And I think what they did with her over the course of this patch added a lot of depth to her, really changed her from a generic I'm the healer sweet girl character into somebody with a bit more depth, more of a sense of, I don't want to say non-violent resistance, but she was more than just I'm the sweet healer girl that needs to be protected. They gave her a bit more bite over the course of the story, and especially at the end where she sort of makes her own sacrifice and so on and so forth. Like that really you kind of ruining why he was kind of stock on the more average side, especially because he was very edgy. He's just, I'll admit I have a soft spot for some of those characters. I don't mind a bit of edge, but I'm gonna claim that he was anything amazing. As far as AAA in general,
and you thought you were taking us down a bunny trail. Oh boy.
Yeah, no, you're good. I mean, as far as AAA in general, I think there's, again, that's sort of a yes and no studio game. There are plenty of games that I have played recently that I think the story has been amazing. There are plenty of stories that I played that I think the story has been okay, that's been really held up with just more style and flair. I think the biggest issue that most video games run into is that by their nature, story is actually a smaller, it is lower down on the hierarchy of needs of a video game than it is on, say, like a movie, because you can get by quite a bit with just interesting gameplay, interesting interaction in the world. The classic example being Mario or Pac-Man. The story on those were rather thin on the ground, but just on a pure mechanics level, they're enjoyable to play, so you continue to play them. And then you have the opposite end of that, which is your what was that old studio? They did like the Batman games and the Walking Dead games and so forth. Here a couple of years ago, I can't remember their name now. You have the Walking Simulators, and you have those Walking Simulators that came out that they're functionally no gameplay. They're just basically game-based stories. So I don't know.
Are you talking like the Tales of Borderlands types?
Yeah.
The Telltale series?
Telltale, yeah. Those style games where they're nothing but story, so they have to lean more heavily into that. And they're so forth. So it's a spectrum. And unfortunately, or I don't want to say unfortunately, but for right now, I think the gameplay has been put on a higher pedestal, rightly or wrongly. And again, that's going to vary by genres. All that to say, I guess a lot of nothing.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned arena shooters not holding them to a higher, as high of a standard as, say, an RPG, which is fair. But it's funny, the first thing that popped in my mind in terms of like squad arena shooters was like Overwatch, which had a ton of lore on their characters for no reason, effectively no reason, right? Because the game was just a multiplayer team squad based, objective arena game. But it had all this backlore. But again, I think that's more of the exception than the rule when it comes to those types of games. I would agree with you. So, but to get off the bunny trail again, I'm didn't mean to go down that deep in it, but you got me thinking, and it was relevant to something I was involved in today. But to bring it back, any closing thoughts for you on 3.3 patch here and story quest specifically?
It served its purpose. I think as far as selling the characters, it did what it was trying to do. I walked away from it happier and interested in both Hyacinth and Cypher. Infinite money being a thing, or if infinite money was a thing, I definitely pull for both of them, since that is not the case in my scenario. Although, if anybody is willing to help on that front, I'm more than willing to accept it. Unfortunately, I'm probably for Cypher just because I'm but I definitely enjoyed her as a character. character and as far as the overall story beats, it was a fine enough bridge. At least it's forward movement. It definitely could have been a lot of sound and fury meaning nothing, signifying nothing, but at least it felt like there was forward in the story.
Well, I think that'll wrap up our discussion here, and I think we have a few other things. There's another topic I want to dive a little bit deeper into, but we're going to save that for our other gotcha games. For now, I think we'll have a couple quick events, or maybe it was just one event to discuss. No new characters this week, so Steve, for the events, I will throw it over to you.
So the only events for this week is with Genshin Impact. It's going to be the Chronicle of Shifting Stratagems, I believe another combat event going on, and that's really the only one on the docket. Honkai Star Rail is still having the Legend of the Galactic Baseballer Demon King event. I do have to say I really enjoy that one. Having played through it, the randomizer elements are enjoyable. Getting the weapons and leveling them up. And again, ZZZ still should have a Tale Through the Looking Glass. So that is the events in Hoyoverse at this time. Dave, what do you got for the wider world of Gotcha?
Yeah, so no new characters this week to review, so we are going to go ahead and just shift out to the wider world of other gotcha games. So a couple of quick hitters, and then maybe open this up for a little bit of discussion. So first and foremost, Nikke, Goddess of Victory, and Stellar Blade, the collaboration is coming. They're going to be doing a special live stream on June 7th, probably to discuss more in depth what that collaboration is going to mean for the Nikke franchise and the Nikke game itself. Maybe they'll also be addressing some of the global player concerns in the recent drama that was the launch of the Chinese server, and some quality of life things that the Chinese server got that the global server did not. I touched on this a little bit last week, and literally the day after we recorded the episode, the developers responded, and the response did not do very much to quell the player concerns. So we'll see if the live stream maybe be another opportunity for them to kind of get back into the good graces of the player base, because I know a lot of folks are looking forward to that Stellar Blade collaboration, which was a pretty successful game that launched on PlayStation back last year, and I believe is actually coming to PC later this year, if I'm not mistaken. So keeping in the same vein of live streams, Brown Dust 2 announced they are doing their live stream for their second anniversary that's coming up. But that live stream is going to be taking place on June 14th. They've already teased some imagery for the upcoming characters and upcoming things for that event. So if you enjoy that game or are wanting to get back into that game, I might have to tune into the live stream and at least see, because that's a game that fell off the rotation recently. But yeah, June 14th for the Brown Dust 2 second anniversary live stream. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about today was actually a little bit of a surprise, because I didn't know much about this game. I think I'd heard about it months and months and months ago, but then completely fell off the radar until it soft launched for the global servers today. And this would be the Re-Memento White Shadow that just came out here today / this past week. Depending on how you want to frame or reference this, right? From when recording today, when this comes out, past week. So this game had not a whole lot of marketing from anything I saw. Not a lot of hype, as everybody's getting more hype for Persona 5X. Their restart right around the corner. So all these other games are maybe getting a little bit more of the hype. Neverness also had some news come out too as far as this. So with this launch, very much under the radar. But I downloaded, tried it out. It does have a PC client. No Steam client at the moment, but it is a turn-based RPG similar to Honkai Star Rail, but it does have more of a Genshin old feel to it. It's not as linear as Star Rail from my time with it. I've put maybe about an hour and a half into it today before we had to get here to start recording, and I wanted to at least get a little bit under my belt to be able to talk about it and expand on it. And Steve, I don't know how much time you maybe had to get into it, but I did want to talk about it a little bit. But yeah, again, this is a Memento White Shadow, a Honkai Star Rail combat system with more of a Genshin Impact exploration overworld with puzzles and things of that nature going on. So, Steve, did you have some time to get into it, and what were some of your thoughts?
I did have some time to get into it. When you say that it's Honkai Star Rail White, I slight bit of pushback. I would agree in the fact that it's a turn-based RPG style. The actual, systems within that turn-based game is different. A lot of it is minor stuff, 4 characters instead of 3. The fact is, or the way that you use your abilities is different. Instead of Q being your skill, Q is just whatever you're going to do, and then you spend skill points in order to level up whatever your action is. So if you use Q, it's basically a basic attack, and you don't use any skill points. I think you gain one at the beginning of each turn anyways. If you level it up once, it's a 1 ability. You spend 3 functionally use your whole turn, instead of gaining energy like you would in Honkai Star Rail or in
Yes, it's like a mana system, but everybody is imbibed Dan Hung. It's just a question of how many E's do you want to use before you queue.
Yeah, exactly. There is some elemental system a part of it as well. I'm going to be honest, I didn't get enough characters to really fully dive into that outside of the training that they give you, the testing that they let you do. It's not bad. None of the characters, at least for me personally, I think the biggest issue is that none of the characters really grabbed me. And maybe you had a different experience with it, but I didn't really fall in love with any of the characters, except for not Lisa. Not Lisa was a fun character, but for different reasons.
So for the game, so you mentioned the characters, so I'll start there. As far as the characters go, there's not really any emotional attachment or anything to the characters. We don't have any of like the direct marketing like Genshin. Like I said, there wasn't really a lot of marketing for the game, so there wasn't really a character I'm like, oh, that's a really cool character, and I like their personality or whatever have you. It's just what we have in the game. Now, as far as the art style, I would say that the art style in the game, the characters, like the colors aren't vibrant. They don't pop like they do in Genshin Impact or in the Honkai Star Rail. It's a little bit more muted, a little bit more reserved, almost similar to, I think, what maybe early Wuthering. I would compare it to early Wuthering Waves.
Yeah.
In terms of the color palette, so more muted, more reserved. And again, my roster isn't that large because I'm an hour and a half in. Now they do give out, there's a beginner banner which guarantees one specific 5-star unit. And I thought it was interesting. So some things that I did want to talk about and see if you noticed and your thoughts on. So for pre-registration rewards, I guess before I even mention the pre-registration rewards, during the quote-unquote prologue or the tutorial, the free characters they give you, it's funny, they give you kind of an Amber type character, a fire, bow and arrow user. You have your main character who's a water element type, and then they give you this healer elf green, a stereotypical green elf who's also a healer. What? So they give you kind of those characters starting out, but then one of the pre-registration rewards is another character who I believe also focuses on healing. And then you get the beginner banner. Well, the beginner banner, the 5-star character, is also focused on healing. And I was surprised that we were just inundated with healers out of the gate and not maybe a tank or a support unit or maybe a DPS. So I would understand not a DPS maybe because the main character is a DPS. So there's that element, but even more so, the green elf healer girl, as part of the pre-registration rewards that came with another healer type character, you got a costume for the generic elf healer girl. And I'm like, if you're sprucing her up to be, maybe the amber of this game in terms of the cheerleader, the guide, as it were, in the early going to the game. Why are you replacing her so quickly with a 5-star character or just the other pre-registration character? So those are the initial thoughts I noticed on the characters.
Yeah, my only real thought, I guess, on that is I feel like and again, without having a more full roster, based off of just what they gave you character-wise, for your first 4 free-to-play characters are your main character, which is a DPS, from what I can tell. You get the healer, you get your not Amber, who is a fire dot character, and then the 4th character is a tank. And it seems to me like they're aiming for a more traditional rock, paper, scissors, Holy Trinity style of gameplay, where you're expected to have a tank that will actually tank, you're expected to have a healer who will heal, and then 2 characters to either DPS or utility characters, whatever. I don't know if that's how it's actually going to play out, because I feel like gachas in a lot of ways don't lend themselves to that, just because of the randomized nature of getting characters. Like, you're not going to be able to guarantee that I guess they've given out the Holy Trinity, but if you need 2 teams at any point in the future, you don't really have a way of...
And to even extend the point further, so you have your beginner banner, right, which has up to 50 pulls, and you'll get a guaranteed 5-star within somewhere in those 50 pulls. Once you get the 5-star character, the banner's gone, right? I was lucky I got mine in 20 pulls, so saved 30 pulls. Sweet, awesome, thank you. But before that banner, you get a free 10 pull, effectively. You get a free 10 pull, and it guarantees a 4-star character. And the 4-star character it guarantees is another DPS character who is the grass element. So you're giving me 3 healers, and the one that you gave the costume from the pre-registration to, you're not only replacing her role with the 2 other healers, one of which came from the pre-registration rewards, and the other one comes from the beginner banner. You're also replacing the grass element with this. You're forcing me to get a DPS grass unit in this first free 10 pull. So I'm just sitting there going, what? Like, I think we could have used a little bit more diversity of the roles here, rather than you're really trying to phase her out. Now, something that I haven't gotten into yet, and maybe here's where this is okay and how they justify it, is so unlike Genshin, unlike Honkai Star Rail, this game has PvP. And currently, it's not a real-time arena, though that feature is supposedly coming this summer, June, July. So perhaps, if I were to dive into kits and the meta of the game, which I have not remotely done at all, because I'm still trying to figure out if this game stays in the rotation, right, is maybe she is more geared towards being a PvP healer, and these other healers are maybe more geared towards being PvE supporters. So that might be a justification for this shenanigan. But on face value, to get 3 healers and then immediately replace her element with another free 4-star, effectively, that is her element. Yeah, I mean, I'd tell them you're phasing her out, which stinks, because, characters that get alternate costumes, I'm like, oh, those are cool. Like, something to see other than the traditional outfit. That's cool. Now, as far as the gameplay itself, the other big thing I do want to mention that is unique to this, that I hadn't seen in Genshin Star Rail, since that's apparently the comparisons we're making, are mounts.
Yeah.
You do get mounts, so you can run around the overworld a bit faster. There's not a stamina bar you have to worry about. You just run on the mount, and it's very easy to hop on the mount and hop off of the mount and go into combat. And then there is auto combat, and there's up to 3 times speed on auto combat, which is also nice. Makes these early level grindings go a little bit quicker. Or these early boss fights go easy as you kind of breeze through the initial storyline. Now they do a good job, I think, getting a lot of the features of the game to you very quickly. So you just essentially complete the prologue, and you get a lot of things introduced to you, such as the arena, the cooking functionality, the affinity system, the gear system, the weapon system. It was funny, I actually already equipped weapons onto all of my characters, and then it was like, oh, by the way, you can equip weapons onto all your characters, and it took me to the tutorial. I was like, nah, I got this, easy. There are, of course, now there's going on are the generous login rewards for, the first 14 days or whatever that you log in. There's the beginner banner quests, which are going to give us more pull currency and more pulls on the standard banner. And then there is one featured banner going on right now. Couldn't tell you anything about it as far as the character on it, what type of role they fill. God, I hope it's not a healer, though, because that would be ridiculous.
You know what? You got to have those heals, man. They want to make sure you've got those heals, right? Healing's going to be apparently important.
This foreshadowing to the end game where it's just healing. It's a new healing meta, not a DPS meta.
My other thought is that they're choosing healers as what they're pushing early on because we talked about this when we talked about DPS versus sustain versus support characters. Maybe they feel that healers and so forth would be less likely to run into future improving issues. Where it's like, okay, if we release a DPS, that's going to get power crept way faster than if we release like a tank or a healer type character. Like those will always be useful. So let's drop one of those and then we can scale up DPS later. I don't know. Maybe that's my only thought is that maybe they're attempting to try and deal with power creep in some way, shape, or form. Similar to Noelle was, I believe, the old beginner banner in Genshin. Where let's give you just an all-rounder.
Yeah, she was the beginner banner there. And speaking of banners, to go into the rates and such. So looking at the banners, essentially it is a 2% chance for a 5-star character. And then of that broken down, essentially you have your 50-50 for the banner character, so the 1% chance technically on the banner character. And then the other 1% is made up of all of the other 5 stars that are out. But they do, from those, there is a light and dark affinity or elements. And so those characters have then a separate of that 1%. So you have all of the standard banner characters in the other 1%, which is really probably 0.75%. And then there's like 3 or 4 light and dark characters, I'll call them. I don't know what their actual affinities are, but essentially it's light dark tropes, right? It's the fire and the grass and the water that affect each other, and then the light and dark don't affect any of those but affect each other. And so these light and dark characters, there's maybe 3 or 4 of them. They make up the other 0.25% of that remaining 1% from the 50-50. And if I've lost you with the numbers because you're unfamiliar with this type of gacha mechanic, I apologize. If you are a gacha gamer, I'm pretty sure that made perfect sense to you. And that is the ridiculousness of some of these systems. But there are, of course, there's a weapons banner as well. And so the current banner goes on right now for the new character. She also then has her signature weapon banner going on too. And then as far as a pity, I actually didn't see any. There wasn't anything denoting a pity. So that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That just means I couldn't find it in my 3 minutes I was taking to try and figure this out, while also trying to play enough to be able to actually speak about it here today. So there may be pity, and it may be listed somewhere. I just missed it. There may not be pity, or there may be pity, and then it's just not listed, and we have to figure out what it is somewhere. But at the very least, it is 2% rates with a 50-50% when you do hit on the banner. So I'll probably be giving it at least a couple days of the login bonuses, do a few polls, build up my roster, and see. Maybe if I get extremely lucky, that'll of course encourage me to play the game more. I'm a sucker for turn-based RPGs, so that has it going in its favor. It's just a question of how much is the ult going to affect exploration story, and then how do they time gate the main story? That's the other issue too with a lot of these gacha games. Do they tie it to your account level and such?
So just to clarify, I did a very, very quick search to check to see if there has been any news on Rumimento White Shadow's pity system. Apparently there is one in place. A 5-star unit is guaranteed after a certain number of pulls. A 4-star unit is guaranteed after a certain number of pulls within the banner system. I don't have exact numbers. I'm just having to go over this real quickly.
It's that certain number is what we're looking for, but it does exist. We just don't know the numbers.
Yeah, it does exist. I don't have the exact numbers. It appears to be targeted, so at least on the standard banner, it looks like there will be a targeted pity. It seems like the threshold on the standard banner for the specific pity would be 200, is what I'm seeing listed here. Again, that is not guaranteed. This is all very wibbly wobbly because I'm taking this
doing this on the fly. Okay.
Doing this on the fly.
We'll take it with a grain of salt, but if we hold that to be true, 200 pulls and it's an excessively large amount, that is more than triple.
I believe that might be referring to something similar to the like first pick your own character pity.
Okay.
That Genshin
that makes more sense, and that is hopefully what that's referring to. If that is referring to a pity of guaranteeing just a 5-star character and not guaranteeing the selector once you hit that threshold for the first time, that would be absurd, because that's 200 is more than double in Genshin if you go to hard pity, more than triple in other gacha games. That would be insane. But again, I'll learn more. I'll have a more full report next week once I maybe give it a little bit more time and play it out a little bit more. It does have a skip button for the story, so I don't believe the story is very much to write home about, so it is easily skippable if you're just in it for the gameplay. From what I've observed briefly, the story didn't necessarily capture me, but if it does, more power to you, more incentive there to watch it. But those are my initial impressions on Re Memento White Shadow. Again, it does have a PC client if you're interested in checking that out, downloading it straight from their website. Or, of course, you can find it on your native app store, assuming it is available in your region. But I think that's going to do it for us this week. We do want to thank you guys for joining us. Let us know your thoughts on Honkai Star Rail's new patch and the story direction. Where are they going to be taking the next chapter? Are we going to be getting more sads, as Steve likes to put it? Or are we going to be making a directional change towards happiness? We'll have to wait and see. If you did enjoy the episode, though, and you'd like to show your support, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel down below. You can email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com if you have any questions or suggestions for the show. And then, of course, we also have the link to the Discord in the description, so you can join us over there for any news, game nights, and content notifications. Be sure to join us next week when we discuss how this podcast has changed our approach to gaming. Until then, keep gaming.